Hello everyone, it's good to be back on this wonderful platform. I haven't seen you guys in about 2.5 months since I last uploaded. My last actual upload was April 22nd, but I had that video sitting for about, I think, 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm doing this update video I'm not going to say I'm going to be consistently uploading, but I've made quite a few significant changes to my lifestyle. And it's my first time actually filming since I've made some of these significant changes. So from the title of the video, you're probably going to know already what I've done as pertaining to that significant change. I quit consuming cannabis as a whole, right? So I'm doing this video to kind of share my experience of how long I was smoking for, and maybe it will help somebody who actually watches the video and has been consuming, I don't want to say a controlled substance, but a drug of some sort for a very long time. Maybe it'll help them quit, or maybe it'll help bring a realization to how long they have been doing it, and maybe the reasons why they were doing it. I had been smoking since I was about 16 years old. I got into smoking cannabis due to the fact that I was moving at the time. It was just around the time of my birthday, and my friends and I were basically in a position where they knew I was moving, they knew we were going to part ways, and I'm not going to blame my friends, but I was in a position where I felt as if I needed to bond with them in a certain way one last time. So one of my friends, who I recently went to his father's funeral, he's since quit smoking since then, or quit consuming cannabis since then. Long story short, he had a joint that he had brought from school, or he got it from school, and then we all took basically one toke on the joint, and I never indulged into cannabis after that fully, but it was like a gradual process of where I was starting to consume it more on a daily basis. At first, for like the whole summer, that summer, I ended up only smoking at nighttime. I was never high during the day. And then eventually you find yourself in different circumstances of life, and then it almost, I can't say the cannabis was consuming me, but you find yourself turning to it when you have nothing else to turn to, right? So I quit actual smoking almost 5 years ago. I went back to it periodically here and there, but from 16 to 22, I was strictly just smoking. I bought a vaporizer a couple times around the age of 18 and 19, when vaporizers weren't even big. I think for my first vaporizer, I paid upwards of $325 for it. And I remember bringing it to my area of where I live, and a lot of people were just completely blown away at it was like basically like one of the most innovative ways of smoking anyone had ever seen. So you can imagine people going from rolling joints to seeing a machine where you place the cannabis in and it doesn't smoke it, it vapes it, right? So a lot of people were shocked when I had it, but I'd always been, in my mind, a bit ahead of everything that everyone else was doing. So I was always looking for new ways to, I guess, not be different, but I always like to try new things, right? No matter the cost of it, obviously. I paid $325 for a vaporizer at the time. But yeah, so I was smoking from about 16 to 22. And then 22, like I said, periodically in between that, I bought a vaporizer a few times. And then I got really into just hitting bowls, where I wasn't actually smoking paper anymore. I would just hit a bong. I remember actually turning 18, and right before I had my son, I invested in a Build-A-Bong that cost me about upwards of, I think, $1,100 or $1,200 for each piece on the bong. And long story short of how that broke, but it ended up breaking, unfortunately. Yes, well, from about 22 to 26, 27, I wasn't consuming cannabis in the normal fashion, right? After my breakup, I was actually minimizing my consumption, to the point where I minimized my consumption so much to the extent where I ended up just turning to vaping the cannabis. Now, cannabis was legal the year it became legal, if I'm not mistaken. It was legalized in 2016, and then it became more accessible, and we had stores opening right around, I think, 2018, 2019. So my access to cannabis became a lot easier. And at that point, I turned to the OCS and I started buying my cannabis from the OCS. And then after the OCS started to get a bit bigger, they started to reduce prices on the actual flower, or the cannabis flower, and they started to push out things like pens, right? CBD pens, THC pens, a lot of these quick and fast ways of vaping without having to have a machine, right? So I went from buying a $325 machine that vaped flower to a point where I was now getting extract that was not any flower, and I was capable of vaping it and buying basically the entire machine in one purchase, right? You didn't have to buy a machine, buy the flower, put it in. So yeah, that's a little bit of my story on how, on the stages that I went through. I always had it in the back of my mind where I wanted to quit. So it's interesting how every stage that I took with it, it got me to this point where I'm cannabis free completely, right? So this is basically, if you can say, I'm kind of reintroducing myself, because I can't say I was functional on cannabis, but I wasn't myself per se, right? So it's really nice to be back and creating content in a manner where I feel more as if I am myself, and it's interesting to, like I said, be creating again, because I found a lot of my creative spark from actually consuming cannabis, right? So I feel really, really good. I feel way more healthy. My workouts are a lot, I guess, more vigorous because of the fact that I'm not thinking so much when I'm actually working out. A lot of things have propelled since I stopped smoking cannabis. And if it's one thing that I could say before my battery dies, or if it's one thing I could say to just kind of like round up the video, is I was one of those people where I always thought I was okay consistently smoking, and I had basically convinced myself that cannabis is good for you and cannabis is okay. But taking the break from it, where I went through the withdrawal, right? It was actually about 3 weeks of full withdrawal, but the first 3 days, it was interesting because the first 3 days was not so hard, but it was the days after the 3 days where you really started to feel the withdrawal. I thought personally it would be the opposite, where the first couple of days would have been bad, and then after the first couple of days you would have been okay because the THC is out of your system. But from what I've read, it takes almost like sometimes upwards of 30 days for it to completely be flushed out, right? So yeah, like it's really different not being on cannabis and just going through my day to day. But if I can say this, it's almost as if I was attempting to fill a void in my life by constantly smoking or constantly consuming cannabis. And now that I'm content or at peace with where my life is going and the direction it's taking, I was able to come off it and stay off of it, right? So if I can give any advice to people who are out there consuming cannabis on a consistent basis still, think about it this way. It is a substance where it alters your behavior, it alters your mind, and it alters a lot of things. It's not unhealthy. There's healthy properties when it comes to cannabis, but at the same time, you weren't prescribed it by a doctor. I'm not speaking to the people who were prescribed cannabis for their medical reasons. I'm speaking to people who took it up recreationally in high school and then now use it as an aid throughout life. All right, if you just try to revert back and think about how you started, why you started, and when you started, and look at where you've come to in your life, really try to analyze if it's something that you still specifically need. Now I can say that maybe it was the economy and the sense of me attempting to consistently cut expenses is what really drove me to quitting. But at the end of the day, I am where I am now, and I've quit. So I feel I'm not going to talk down on people who still smoke, because just 4 months ago, I was the guy who was telling people like, oh, no, I'm fine. I don't need to stop. I wasn't telling people that, but I was saying that in my head, right? So I'm not here to talk down on the people who are still consistently smoking. But like I said, think about it and really analyze your situation and analyze why you started. And maybe it can bring a sense of realization where you could either, not telling you to go cold turkey, because it took me a little while just to completely stop. I had to do CBD pens first to kind of just move myself out of the habit of actually doing it. and then eventually like you go 2-3 days, 4 days without anything, and then you just notice that life is pretty much normal. Like I said, it won't be the same experience for everybody, but I do highly suggest that if it's something that you've been doing for years, try going through life without it and see where it takes you. Right now, for the next string of videos that I'm going to be attempting to put out, I'm obviously not going to be talking about cannabis. I'm just going to go back to our regular scheduled program, so to speak. Right, so they closed my exchange for Forex back in March. I'm going to discuss that, but like I said, those videos are to come, so to speak. So I appreciate everybody who tuned into this one, because I'm not just finance, right? Or I'm not just money. So I appreciate you guys again, all the followers who continue to stick around and just hang out for the content that I do put out, and anybody who's returned to the channel, or people who are new followers. I appreciate you guys. The old ones especially, I really appreciate you guys. You guys know where I started this stuff. It was when I did my 100 to 30,000 video. And like I said, I am a human being, so I do other things other than just invest and trade. So thank you, I appreciate you, and I will see you guys in the next video.